Hello everyone, and welcome to our install video for the low pro bumper for the 4th gen Toyota Tacoma. We're going to go ahead and show you what comes in the kit, so I'm just going to get started here. First off, you're going to have the low pro bumper, the mounting brackets for the bumper, 2 flat spacer plates to go behind the brackets, 2 of these L brackets to reconnect and secure the plastic bumper to the low pro. You'll get your hardware kit with everything needed for the install, and also this bridge skid which goes between the low pro bumper and the front frame of the truck. So we have our Tacoma here in the shop ready to go. We're going to show you guys how to start taking apart the front end to get your low pro installed. One important thing to note is that all C4 bumpers ship bare steel, so they will need to be powder coated or painted before you install them on your vehicle. All right, so we're going to get started here. We're going to need a 10mm socket or wrench, and we need to remove some screws from up in the fender well here. So there's one right here with this little tab behind it. We need to remove that one, this one here, and then this next one down right there. So we're going to go ahead and take those out. You can go ahead and take those 3 out of both sides. Next, we're going to remove the 2 plastic pins from these points here. So we're going to use a flat blade screwdriver, turn it 90 degrees, and then just get underneath it and pull it right out. So now we're underneath the front bumper, and if yours is a sport model, you need to take this lower valance piece off. So there's a bunch of screws along the bottom that use a 10mm socket. So there's these 2 on each side, and then there's 4 all across the middle out here on the front. So you need to remove all the screws and everything that hold this plastic valance piece on and take that off of the truck. So there's also going to be 2 more little 10mm headed screws here that you would need to remove. We don't have those right now because we've already cut behind this plastic piece here, but normally you would have 2 more there you need to remove to get the bumper off. We also have to take off this little skid plate here that joins between the bumper and the frame. So those are going to be a 12mm socket. Take these 4 bolts off. Next, we're going to be removing these factory tie-down points here. So those are a 17mm socket. So we have 2 more screws that are hiding underneath this felt cover here. Those are also a 10mm socket. There's 1 on each side here. So next we're going to peel back this felt fender liner here, push these little plastic clips off of the flare, and then we just kind of need to move this back out of the way. Can usually tuck it behind the tire there, and then we have to get the flare unclipped and pull it out so we can get the bumper cover from under it. So you have to reach behind here. They're kind of hard to find, and they're hard to see also. But one is right down at the very bottom corner here. It's just like a flat pin that goes in with a little stopper that you have to push in so it'll release. So you want to reach in there and push on that little flat pin, and then there's another one up here that's even harder to get to. Where is it at? Yeah, so it's about right here, about 6 inches up from this other one. So we need to get that one pop loose, and then you can just pull straight out on the flare. And there's just little plastic clips in here that'll pop out when you pull on it. So come around to the front here, and we'll show how these first clips that I was removing, I guess there's actually 3 of them. So you basically have to push this little tab in so it'll release, and these will all pop out. So there's 3 of those, and then the other ones are just little round clips that will pop loose when you pull the flare out. So that's far enough. We just need it loose enough so that we can get this bumper cover out from underneath it. So once you have your flare pop loose on both sides, now we need to get the bumper cover off. So this is actually just clipped on to the fender here, and then underneath the headlight, it's just kind of press clipped on. So you have to go reach up behind this plastic here and try to push on it from the back as much as you can to get it started down in this corner. It takes quite a bit of force to pop it loose, but you want to really try and push on it from the back as much as you can instead of peeling or pulling from up here, because it can split this plastic and kind of break it, and then it won't reattach very well. So you need to go behind there and pop that loose just like this on both sides. All right, so we've moved up top into the engine bay here, popped open the hood, and we need to remove a few plastic clips and screws. So first we're going to take this little cover panel off above the radiator here. There's a bunch of these little plastic clips. You just depress the center of them. So you want to go around and do that on all of them. Now you can lift those out individually if you want to, or you can just leave them all hanging in there. They will do that if you pull too hard on it though. You can just lift this whole panel out and they'll all just kind of come with it. So we're going to grab our 10mm socket and remove these 3 screws holding the top of the grill in place. Now we have 2 plastic plugs we need to undo here. You can see there's 3, but only the top 2 need to be disconnected. The bottom one will go with the grill. So now we're about ready to take this entire front end off the truck. Just one thing to do before you take it off. We have a blanket just laying on the floor ready to go so we can put this face down and it doesn't get scratched once we pull it off. So really the first thing we have to do, you can see this little plastic pin here, we have to lift the grill up and over that pin so it'll come loose. And then the only other thing that's really holding this bumper in place, you can't see it, but behind the grill down on the bottom here, there's a couple of plastic support clips where these little louvers clip into. So if it's not wanting to come loose, sometimes you kind of have to wiggle it down in the middle here, side to side, and pull on it, and it'll eventually just pop loose. And you could hear it right there. Those big ones came loose down in the middle. So once that comes out, you're ready to take the whole front end off the truck. So you can take this whole piece and just set it aside. So the next piece we're going to take off is this little support bracket here. That's the one that front bumper was clipped into in the last clip. So we're going to take this whole thing off just to get it out of our way, and it will get reinstalled later. And those screws use a 10mm socket. So next we're going to remove this entire crash bar here. It comes with these big metal brackets that are floating out there. So it's just 8 bolts total that hold that on using a 17mm socket. So there's 2 on the top here and then 2 on the very bottom. So those have welded nuts on the back, so you don't need any tools on the back. You just have to take these bolts out. So these ones are a 17mm socket. And you can take all of these bolts off. This crash bar will not fall out. There's 2 little threaded pins that kind of hold it in place so that it doesn't actually fall off. So now we're just going to grab this entire piece and pull it right off the front of the truck. And we can set that whole piece aside. We'll no longer be using this. We also need to remove this little plastic lower valance piece here from below the condenser. So this just has 3 little plastic clips on each side. These ones are opposite style of the ones we did up above. You actually have to get under the head of the clip and pop it out. So you want to do all 3 of those on each side and just take this whole piece out, and we will no longer be reusing this one either. So we've got everything removed from the front of the truck now that we have to take off to install our Low Pro. Next we're going to move on to taking the plastic bumper cover. We're going to put that on a cart, and we'll show you guys how to disassemble a couple pieces on there and then prepare for cutting out the plastic so the Low Pro will fit into the bumper. All right, we have our whole front bumper assembly off the truck now. We put it on a cart here face down on a blanket just so nothing gets scratched, and we're going to show you which screws we need to remove to get this lower plastic cover off of the bumper cover. So there's a bunch of these little silver Phillips head screws inside here. Basically all of these that you can see in this whole area need to come out. We have to take these little plastic clips off of here that attach these pieces, take those out, all the silver screws, and then the ones that are also up here in this corner, up by the fog light. We need to take those out as well. So we're going to grab a screw gun and get started on that. So now that we have all of those little silver screws out of the backside, the first piece we need to take off is this upper plastic piece that goes around the fog lights. That one has to come off in order to get this lower one out from underneath it. One thing to watch for, this particular truck does not have park sensors, but if yours does, you'll have two little round sensors up here in this plastic cover, and you'll need to disconnect the wiring from the back of those, just unplug them, and when you pull this off, the sensors should go with it. So we're going to flip the bumper cover back over again and show you how to start taking this piece out. All right, so we just have a long flathead screwdriver here. We're going to show how to take these, get these clips apart. So there's a bunch right down in this area here, and you basically just need to push this little tab away from this part of the clip. So you pull that back and then push down on this plastic cover that's on the other side of the bumper, and that will start to release. You just have to work your way around and do them all at the same time. So you have to reach down in between this active air dam here and pry those open. Now, you kind of want to be careful with them because you need to be able to clip them back in. If you bend them too far, this little tab can break off, and then it won't be able to reconnect when you put that cover back on. So you want to work your way around and undo all of those, and then you'll be able to push that cover off from the back side here once those are all disconnected. And then for this lower plastic cover, the process is very similar. It's just a little bit slightly different style clip, but you just need to push that tab in and then it will release. So you need to work your way around all of these and then down along this area right below the fog lights and remove all of those, and then both of those plastic covers will come off. Okay, we got all of our clips popped loose. You kind of have to push down on that plastic from the backside to get it out, because these do want to try to reconnect themselves as you're working your way around. So just make sure you're pushing down on that a little bit while you pop them loose, and then take this whole piece out. All right, we got all these clips loosened up all the way around this lower balance, so we're just going to lift up bumper cover, take this whole piece out. Then we're going to go ahead and flip over this assembly and show you guys where to cut. All right, I'm going to show you guys where we want to cut, and then I'm going to apply some tape just to give a reference line as soon as we're ready to cut. So we need to basically cut right up to the bottom of these rectangle holes here, right along this little indented shape. So that's the line we want to cut against all the way across here. So I'm going to lay a piece of tape above that so we can cut up to it. And then along the edges here, we're going to come out and then cut right down in this groove here on this side, down in that groove there. So we want to be careful before, probably tape off some of this so you don't scratch any of it up with the grinder. I'm going to go ahead and apply the tape, and we'll show you guys how to start cutting. So you can see in the video that I kind of cut this lower piece into a few chunks just to get it out of the way and get this big tall part out of here so that I could get in and cut down on this groove easier. Now that all that's out of the way, we added another piece of masking tape to this edge here just so that we don't scratch and cut into the paint. And we're going to go ahead and continue our cut line right across into this corner and then cut down in the bottom of this groove all the way down on both sides. So now that we have all of our cutting down on the bottom there, we need to go ahead and reinstall this upper black trim piece here. So that just goes right back over your fog lights. You just push it down and clip it into place there. Of course, if you have park sensors on yours, you also need to make sure that you get those plugged in again to the wiring harness. Just something to watch for when you put this piece back in. All of these little clips along here where they go back in. So when we push this back in, we want to make sure that this little tab on that clip, you have to push it back over, otherwise it doesn't really snap in place or anything. So push those back over just to make sure that the clip holds it, and then you'll need to go and reinstall your Phillips head screws all along here too, that can go back into that piece. Now we're ready to get started with installing the Low Pro onto the frame of the truck. So the first thing we have to do is put our mounting brackets onto the truck. And the parts that come with those is obviously the big mounting brackets themselves. We got two of those. There's two of these just flat plate spacers that go behind them on the frame. And then for hardware, you're going to need 12 of the 1/2-inch flat washers. Those are just the silver ones, not the grade 8 ones. And then you'll need 6 of the original metric bolts that came off the frame. These are the ones we removed to take off that big aluminum crash bar. So you need to reuse 6 of those. And then we also provide 4 metric M12 nuts. So these look very similar to a 1/2-inch SAE nut. So just make sure you have the right ones and the correct thread pitch. You'll need these nuts to be able to thread onto these original metric bolts that came out of the frame. So double check those that you have the right ones before we go ahead with this install. We are ready to get our mounting brackets installed in the frame. First we need to put our spacer plates on. So this one lines up with this little mounting stud that's on the frame there, with the offset of the hole towards the top of the plate. Just kind of set that on there for now, and then we'll grab our big mounting plate, our mounting bracket, and we want to line these with this little gusset piece goes to the outside of the truck as long as this flat piece is on the bottom. So that's kind of hard to explain, but this flat part is always on the bottom of the bracket, gusset to the outside. So we're going to go ahead and align this hole here with that mounting stud as well. Just kind of slide it on and let it hang there. And then we'll grab one of our factory metric M12 bolts, and we're going to put one of our big flat 1/2-inch flat washers on there. And we'll just go ahead and get this one started in the bottom to hold our bracket in place. And we need to do the same thing for this one on the bottom here too. Now up here we're going to use 2 more of these metric bolts with flat washer on each side, and then the M12 nuts that we send with the hardware kit. So these are going to go all the way through our spacer plate that's back there. So you have to make sure that you get this spacer lifted up so the bolt can go through that plate also. And then another 1/2-inch flat washer and the metric nut on the back. Now these, you basically just want to thread them in kind of by hand until they're most of the way in, but you want to leave these pretty loose so that this plate can easily slide in and out. So we can go ahead and do the other side, get that one in place. So now we have to prep a couple things on the bumper before it goes on the truck. First off, you install your C4 logo if you're putting that on the front here. This particular bumper, we didn't have enough room to cut the logo in like we usually do just because of how small this front face is here. So we send a separate logo with the bumper. These are cut from stainless steel, so you can leave it raw stainless or you can paint it, whatever you prefer to do. We send little 2.5mm screws to attach this. You could also use a pop rivet if you have a rivet gun or something like that, but we're going to use these screws that we send with it. So screws go through the front, and I'm going to put the logo on. Then on the back side here we have a little flat washer, lock washer, and then the nut that goes on there. So those are obviously quite small, but the sizes that you'll need to tighten those down is a 1.5mm Allen wrench and then a 5mm socket for the nut on the back side. And that's, being such a small screw, you just barely have to snug it down and it'll be fine. Those don't need to be tightened very much. So I'm going to go ahead and put this other one in, and then we'll be able to tighten everything down. So next up, if you're installing S2 lights into your bumper and the additional fog light pockets there, you'll need to, first of all, flip the bezel over on the light because these lights are actually mounting upside down. Typically the mounting pedestal goes down, but on this bumper it has to go up. So you'll want to take your bezel off and flip it over just so your logo and everything is upright. And then go ahead and it just slides right in to this bracket that we have built into the bumper here. So of course you can adjust that front to back wherever you want it, and you'll be able to rotate the light if you say you want them pointing out farther wide towards the ditches or something like that instead of straight ahead. You can make all your adjustments there and then go ahead and tighten down your light. All right, we're ready to go ahead and take the low pro bumper and put it on the truck. So we have these mounting brackets. Obviously you have some adjustment here. We're going to have them, leave them slid all the way to the outside so that the bumper goes in place easily. And then we're going to kind of pull those into it and get the hardware going. So we're using our 1/2-inch grade 8 carriage bolts with grade 8 flat washers, nuts, and nylock washers. So on this side, we're going to put the carriage bolt in. We can go from the outside of the bracket to the inside of the bumper. Then over here on the passenger side, we need to go the opposite, or well, I guess the same direction, but the bolts need to be pointing in the same direction as that side so that we have clearance for our winch. Otherwise there won't be room, do this one. Otherwise there won't be room for the winch to fit and it'll hit on the bolt if we do not install them with this orientation. So I'll get a couple more in there just to hold it so it doesn't rotate. So now that we have a low pro on the truck, we have all of our 1/2-inch grade 8 carriage bolts put in with the nuts and washers and everything in place. And we just kind of tighten those by hand. They're not very tight yet, just tight enough to get our main mounting brackets pulled together so that they're up flush against the sides of the low pro mounting brackets. And now we want to adjust the whole bumper. It has side-to-side adjustment because these mounting brackets have slotted holes in them. So we want to get it adjusted. We kind of use this stud as a reference here. So you can slide this bumper side to side. You can see how much that is adjustable there. And we want to line it up so that this stud is pretty much right in the center of this slotted hole here. Once you have it centered like that, then we can go ahead and tighten down this metric hardware. You don't have to snug it down all the way tight yet, but tighten it enough to get some pressure on there so that these main mounting brackets won't move around anymore. They'll stay in place. So once those are snugged down, then we can adjust the bumper. There's some movement up and down and front to back on those mounting brackets. So next we want to basically adjust the bumper up so it's about halfway up on its slotted position, and then about halfway front to back as well. Then we're going to put our cover back on, the whole plastic bumper, and see how everything fits. So I'm snugging down these 12mm bolts here. Use a 19mm wrench on the back for the ones that we had to add the nuts to that we sent with the hardware kit. And we can just kind of tighten these down a little bit. It's not a lot, but just enough to hold this main mounting bracket in place so it doesn't move around while we're trying to adjust the rest of the bumper. So I grabbed a floor jack and put it underneath the low pro here just to lift it up for adjustment to get it up. We go just a little bit above center of these slotted holes where the adjustment is here. We kind of go till this bumper bracket is a little bit above the top edge of this main mounting one here. That's usually a pretty good place to start. And then as far as front to back adjustment, you can see on the slotted holes here, we have our bolt right about the center of that slotted hole is where we usually set it up. So we're going to move the bumper back just a little bit until that bolt is about centered in that slotted hole. And then you'll just want to make sure that it's the same on both sides, that your bumper isn't crooked on there, that you have all of them centered on the bolts, and that's usually a pretty good starting point. And then kind of tip your bumper a little bit too to make sure this is nice and level on the same plane as this mounting bracket. Once you have it in the spot where you like it, then you can snug down a couple of these bolts to hold everything in place. And then we're going to go ahead and put this bumper cover back on and see how our reveal lines up with the plastic. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten these bolts just a little bit here, using a 3/4 inch wrench for our 1/2 inch carriage bolts. And it doesn't take a whole lot to hold this in place. I'm just going to tighten 2 on each side. And that'll be enough to hold everything in place. So before we put the bumper cover back on, we're going to install this lower support bracket real quick. We just need to be able to clip the bumper into it so that the bumper is sitting in the right spot, so we can check our fitment properly. So we are ready to put the plastic front end, bumper cover and everything all back on. So just a couple things to watch out for when you're putting it on, to make sure that you're not scraping the side of your low pro to scrape the paint or the powder coat when you get it on there. You also kind of have to make sure the flares get pulled out a little bit so the bumper plastic can fit in between there. And then you have to kind of clip in this lower portion into these brackets too as you put it on. So I'm going to grab that and get everything put in place. Then you want to make sure that you lift these upper grill mounting brackets all the way over so they lock into those little plastic pins. And then we kind of want to push the bumper back here in place. You probably don't have to completely clip this in up here because that is kind of hard to get apart. But we want to make sure the center is locked into that bracket right there in the middle that I just pushed it into. Make sure it's clipped into that all the way because that's going to give us the best fitment around here. So once all that's in place, you want to take a look and make sure you have an even reveal all the way across here, an even gap, and that one side of the bumper isn't sticking out farther than the other, and that you're pretty even along the sides here. So I think ours is looking pretty good from those initial measurements of how we set it up. So if you're happy with the way it is, we're gonna pop this cover back off and tighten everything down. If you need to make a slight adjustment somewhere, just take note of about how much you need to move it, and then you can take this cover off, adjust it, and then tighten everything down. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this back off since we like where it's at. All right, so we've got our low pro all fully adjusted where we want it, and it's time to tighten down all of this hardware. I'm gonna remove this upper piece mounting bracket again just to get it out of the way. It makes it easier to mount the hardware. Also, we're going to put the winch in next, so you will need to move this out of the way anyway to put the winch in. So you can go ahead and tighten down all of these 1/2-inch grade 8 carriage bolts and all of these M12 bolts. Those can all go to 90 foot-pounds if you're looking for a torque spec on those. So you can get all of that tightened down, and then we're going to go ahead and put our winch in. All right, everything's tightened down on our bumper. We're going to go ahead and install our winch in the bumper now. You want to do the fair lead first just because it's easier to get to the hardware on the back of the fair lead. So we're going to go ahead and put that in here. Now we're going to go ahead and put our winch in place. So we already put the nuts down inside the body of the winch there. One thing to note with this winch and most of them that have the lever on the top here, if you can rotate the body of the winch so that handle is forward, that usually makes it a lot easier because this upper support bracket that comes in gets really close to that handle and it can be hard to reach in there and turn the handle. So if you want to clock your winch body and turn that handle down, you can do that right now before you put it in. Also, this handle, you can flip it around so it rotates the other way, and that also will help give you some more clearance so the lever turns back the other direction, just so it's not hitting on this support bracket here. So we're going to go ahead and set the winch in place. And we'll get all of our bolts threaded in the bottom. I want to make sure that you feed your winch rope through before anything gets bolted in and you can't get it into position. So our winch mounting holes have a little bit of slots so you can adjust the winch front to back. In this situation for this truck, I usually adjust the winch back just so you have more room by the lever here away from this support bracket that we were talking about earlier. So adjust the winch back and just make sure you're not rubbing on any of your wires or anything back here along the condenser or anything, and then you can tighten down your winch bolts, and then you can also install your winch hook as well. Okay, everything's tightened down here with our winch, and one thing, you might just want to pull your power and ground cables up through into the engine bay now. That might be easier, at least to put it somewhere where you can access it, reaching down from the top after everything else is put back on. We're not wiring this one up right now. We just kind of set it in here for the install, so we're going to leave it be. I'm going to go ahead and put the support bracket back on here so we can get that reinstalled, and then we'll be ready to put our entire front bumper cover and grill and everything back on. Come on, get in there. So as we're putting everything back together here, now we can actually pull our flare out of the way, clip everything back on all the way. So you just want to push it up to the headlight here. Come on. There we go. Clip it into the edge of the fender and underneath the headlight. Make sure the center part, we push on that to clip it into our support bracket underneath there. And then we can get our fender flares put back into position too. Just make sure that all three of these tabs are lined up with the slots in there so that they go in properly without bending them or breaking them off. And then just push on your flare back here. Sometimes those clips pop out quite a ways back, so you want to make sure those are all clipped in as well. Now up top here, we want to make sure that we lift this grill all the way up over that plastic pin and get it locked into its little mounting spot there. And then plug in your wiring connectors here. Then you can go ahead and reinstall these little screws, the three across the top. And then if you are wiring your lights and winch, you probably want to leave this top cover off for now so that you can pull your wires through into the engine bay. If you're not doing any of that, you can go ahead and reinstall this plastic cover with all the little push pins also. All right, we're back in the wheel well here, just kind of putting things back together. You want to make sure your felt is aligned properly, that this part tucks behind the fender flare. And then we need to clip those back to the flare. And then you can go ahead and put all your screws back in up here. And then the little plastic pins, push those in. And then you can go all the way down and put this screw in the bottom as well. Just do not put any of these in because we need to add a little support bracket going from here to our low pro bumper to get this all held in place correctly. So next we're going to install these L-shaped brackets to support the plastic bumper here. These are going to attach to our low pro bumper using 3/8 hardware. So first we're going to grab 3/8 by 1 carriage bolt. It's going to install from the inside of the bumper here through this square hole. And then we need to align this bracket with this long slotted hole up and the other leg pointing back towards the back of the vehicle. Then we're going to use 3/8 flat washer and a 3/8 flange nut to go onto that carriage bolt. Just tighten that up by hand. Then we're going to use 3/8 by 1 flange bolt with a flat 3/8 flat washer to go up through the bottom here through the plastic and into our L bracket with another 3/8 flat washer on top and a 3/8 flange nut to tighten that down. Now what you're going to want to do, there's a little bit of adjustment there with that slotted hole. You can kind of push this plastic up and down a little bit to get it where you want it to sit. We basically just kind of set it up so it comes across flush with the bottom of the low pro over to the plastic. Just kind of a nice transition there. So you can do that and then go ahead and tighten down your hardware. Use 9/16 wrenches for that. This upper carriage bolt here and this flange nut both. So this upper carriage bolt here, you can tighten to 30 foot-pounds. And then this flange nut here, we don't want to over tighten that one because it'll just smash that plastic on the bottom. So you pretty much tighten this one up with a wrench till it's nice and snug and you have a lot of good pressure on that plastic, but don't over tighten it to the point where it's smushing out the plastic and really squishing it there. So once that's adjusted and tightened where you want it, then we can put this felt fender liner back in place. This little pocket here is going to go right over that bolt, and then we're going to use one of the original screws that went into the plastic, into that clip in here. So we'll thread those in and tighten that up with 10mm socket, and that'll hold everything in place. So the last piece we need to put on here is our bridge skid that goes from the bumper to the frame under here. It replaces the original one that we can't reuse anymore. So this skid plate's going to have nuts welded to the back side here, and that goes above this flange on the bumper here. So you want to put the skid in with it going above the bumper, and then line up the back with the factory holes here, and you're going to use the two original bolts that came out of those holes to reinstall this skid plate. Now in the front, we're going to use the 1/4x1 button head bolt with a 1/4" flat washer. Those will go through the holes in the bumper and thread into those nuts that are welded in the back. Now you just want to make sure that you get your skid plate aligned so it's not crooked on there. It's nice and even from left to right. You can go ahead and tighten down this hardware. So now that you've got everything installed on the truck, you might want to just go back through and take a look, make sure all of your hardware is tight, double check things. And then also if you wired a winch or fog lights, make sure that your wiring is all routed safely and it's not rubbing on any areas that might cut into it. Once all of that is done, you've double checked your work, the install of your low pro bumper on your Tacoma is complete.